If you've been looking for a stylish bag with quilting pockets and lots of versatility, then you're going to love this one. Hi sewing friends, my name is Stephanie and this is Ashtown Creations. Today we are making the brand new Fab Flap Bag by Belle Originals. This bag has so many fun details, quilting on the upper panels, two roomy slip pockets on the outside, and grab handles that give it such a polished look. There is also the option of adding a removable crossbody strap or a shoulder strap. So I've just done the shoulder strap. Inside, there is a zippered pocket for the important stuff and a built-in slip pocket for quick access. I will be walking you through the whole process step by step. But before we jump in, don't forget to hit that like button, share this tutorial with your sewing friends, leave any comments in the comment section below, and of course, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on more tutorials and sewing fun. In the description box below, I will leave a link to the pattern, all the materials I can find, and I will also include timestamps so you can jump to whatever section you want. I want to say thank you to Cyndi from Belle Originals for allowing me to record this tutorial for you. So grab your fabric, get cozy at your machine, and let's make this gorgeous bag together. Let's go through the pieces for the Fab Flap Bag. Up here we have our exterior upper. So I have a cotton canvas. This is from my fabric dresser. And I have put on some fleece. I'm supposed to have fusible fleece, but this fleece wasn't fusible. So it also calls for a woven interfacing. So you put the fleece down first and then the woven interfacing on top of it. This will hold the fleece in place if you don't have fusible fleece, but it will also protect your feed dogs from the fleece because we're going to be quilting these two pieces. So I have two of the exterior fabric and then two of the fleece and two of the woven for those pieces. The next we have is the fabric for our exterior slip pocket. There's going to be two pockets, so one on the front, one on the back. I have two pieces of this cotton canvas and then two pieces. They are not interfaced. I have not interfaced these because I thought it might be thick enough. And then I have two pieces of quilting cotton that I have used woven interfacing for. So these are the exterior slip pockets and they will go here, and then our straps our little handles will go there. So now I have the fabric for the lower. I have chosen to use a Morofaux leather and I have not put any interfacing on or any fleece. I'm just going to be using the Morofaux leather as it is. I have fabric. I'm going to move this out of the way. This is the fabric for the flap. So on the exterior of my flap, that will come down here, it will be the Morofaux leather on the exterior, and then I've got my quilting cotton for the lining of the flap. It also has a woven interface and it has the fusible fleece, and this time I did use actual fusible fleece on this. So I've only marked the pattern piece is a rectangle, and I've taken one of my spools of thread and I put it along the edge here, and then I drew around it, cut it out. I'm only cutting it out of the one right now because once I stitch it on, then I will trim up these edges to match. So this is the flap. Also with the flap, you need a couple pieces of a woven interfacing. So I've got two pieces here. Put this over here, and then for the lining, this is the lining. I'm again using my quilting cotton and I have put my woven interfacing on. Some of these pieces, the dimensions for the woven interfacing are smaller than the dimensions for the piece itself. I have found that in this case I actually cut it out. Move these aside so you can see it. So I cut both pieces out exactly the same size. My woven interfacing shrinks, So before I actually fused it on, I sprayed it with water all over, let it shrink up, and then fused it down. So I didn't actually cut it out to the dimensions. If your woven interfacing does not shrink, then you can cut it out to the dimensions in, or the measurements in the pattern. If yours shrinks, it's worth trying to spray it with water, let it shrink down, then put it in. Now I don't have a full, seam allowance on the side, but I have an industrial machine, so it will be able to handle this. If yours can't, then make sure you have it out of the seam allowance. So I have 2 of these for the lining. There we go, and they're both ended up the same way. So I cut them exactly the same size, and then it shrunk up. So the other pieces I have 4 pieces cut for my interior lining pockets. So there is a slip pocket inside that is done a different way than we normally do our slip pockets. And there's also a zippered pocket. So I have 2 pieces of my quilting cotton for each, all 4 of them interfaced with the woven interfacing. And again, I cut it to size, and then I shrunk it down with the water and then fused it into place. So those are the 4 lining pocket pieces. Here I have 2, these are for the D-ring straps. On the side you can put a crossbody strap or a shoulder strap on top. I will be doing the shoulder strap, so I had just enough webbing for a shoulder strap. So I'm going to be doing a shoulder strap, and these are the anchors for the D-rings. So I have not, these are just the cotton canvas. I have not interfaced them. They should be fine. They should be fine on their own. And then I have 2, I'm using 1-inch hardware for this whole bag. So I'm using, the D-rings are 1-inch. I have swivel hooks that are 1-inch, and I'm doing the shoulder strap. If I haven't mentioned it, I'll be using the 1-inch for that. The flap requires a magnetic snap. I'm using an 18mm. I'm nickel so that it matches everything. So I've got my magnetic snap here for the flap. I have a zipper cut for the interior pocket. And then I also have the webbing here for the 2 grab handles that go from the bottom of the outside all the way up to the top. So the other thing I have is my Ashtown Creations cork label. That's all. I think I've got everything here. So let's get sewing the Fab Flap bag. All right, now we are going to prepare the exterior upper part. If you have not added your fusible fleece and your woven interfacing, if you're going to add them, make sure you add them now, because we are going to quilt this piece. I've already gone ahead and quilted one of my pieces. Now quilting does shrink it down a bit, but it doesn't seem to be too bad. I have decided, I don't know if you can actually see, I've decided to do, mine look like diamonds in the pattern. It looks like she's got just squares on the edge. So I've used a 30 and 60 degree angle in the pattern. It looks like Cyndi has used a 45 degree angle. So, but our spaces in between are 1 inch. So setting this one aside, I'm going to work with this piece. I have my ruler here, and if you can see, I've got 60 degree lines, 30 degree lines, there's 45 degree lines on my ruler. So when I start at the bottom, I have my 60 degree line here and it ends there. So I have marked the center of the side and the center of the bottom and center of the side here. I'm going to place the 60 degree line along the bottom edge and match up this edge with my center mark. I've got an error erasing pen, and I'm going to make sure when you mark your panel that you're using something that can be erased. On white, I would not use yellow chalk because I find that doesn't go away. The error erasing pen works. If you have a water erasing pen marker, make sure it comes off of your fabric. whatever you're using, make sure you can get rid of the marks. So I'm just going to start and draw a line from one side of the panel down to meet that mark. I'm going to move my ruler over an inch, make sure I've lined it up with my 1 inch mark, and I am going to draw the next one. Do it again, move it over, do the next one, and I'll continue this all the way over, flip my piece around, and then continue, line up the 1 inch and draw the line. And I will continue this line all the way from one side to the other. Then I'm going to flip it this way, and I've got my center mark there. So now I'm going to take my 30-degree line, which is there. I'm going to place it along the bottom, and I'm going to match up the notch with the edge of the ruler where the 30-degree line ends, and I am going to draw that line again. Just like on the other side, I'm going to match up the 1 inch line with the one I just drew and do that. You can take, if you have a long 1 inch ruler, you can take that if it makes it easier, or in the pattern Cyndi uses a yardstick, so you can use this. And don't forget to do the other side. So you don't need to go all the way into the corner like this. There's no point because we have our seam allowance. You won't need to do this little line here. I don't need to have that because it will be in the seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to finish marking out my panel. And then when we come back, we will move over to the sewing machine and I'll show you the first little bit of how I go about stitching it. All right, I have it all drawn out, and when I draw mine out, I end up with an elongated diamond. If you use a 45-degree angle, you end up more with a diamond that's a square on its tip. So I have my machine set on a 5-stitch length. I don't usually like the results of quilting on my industrial machine. I do have a quilting machine, and I like the results when I do that better, but this will work. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pick a spot and start, and I do back stitch. So when I do my quilting, so when I start my quilting, I'll just pick a spot. I don't break my stitches at the end of the line. I just find the next line I can sew and move on. So I'll show you a bit of what I do on this piece. I'm not going to show the whole quilting of it on camera. Anyway, so I do back stitch when I'm going to cut my stitches. My understanding is regular quilters don't. They just cut their stitches, they don't back stitch. I have had it pull out too many times on me, so I do back stitch when I'm going to cut my stitches. So anyways, I back stitched. Now I'm just going to follow the line all the way down to the end here. I'm off. I lift my presser foot and I turn and I find the next line that's close. So I could have gone over to this one, or I'm deciding I'm going to do the cross one, and I'm leaving it attached, and I'm just continuing up. If you don't leave enough thread back here, you can pinch it. I think I've got a few pinches on this one because I didn't quite leave enough thread, but it'll be fine on this. This will be fine. So I'm just going to continue up. My next line that's closest is this one, so I'm just going to turn and come down this one. So in this one, I am going to just skip over to here and come up. So make sure I have enough thread, and then come over here. And then this one, I'm just going to turn and come down here. And if I get to one like this where it's either a really big jump, I can make that jump, but if it was too big of a jump or there wasn't one very close by, then I would just get to the end and I back stitch a bit, pull it out, cut it off, find another spot to start that hasn't been done, and then continue on. So I back stitched at the beginning of that one. All right, so I'm going to continue on with this. I'm not a quilter, I'm a bag maker, but I'm just showing you how I go about doing it. It all gets done, and you can, on this one, I can check the back to make sure that there's no holes, like there's no spots that I've missed. So I'm just going to go and finish this, and then we can move on to the next step. I have both pieces quilted. I'm just going to set these aside for now, and hopefully the lines that like the air erasing pen I used will erase itself. Anyways, setting those aside, now we're moving on to preparing our exterior slip pockets. So I've cut 2 pockets, and that's what the pattern calls for. So I'm going to be working with 2 pockets. So we're going to be putting them right sides together, the exterior and the lining of the pockets right sides together. So if you have a directional print, make sure that you have it going in the right direction. And I'm going to put them right, like I said, right sides together. I'm going to grab a couple clips. Now in the pattern, you have the option of stitching just the top side, or you can do the top and bottom. So if you do the top and bottom, you're going to have a seam at the bottom that will be kind of in the way of when you place your pocket on the exterior piece. You'll have a seam down here, so it could end up being too bulky. So you have the option of just doing the top one if that's what you want. And that's actually what I'm going to do. I'm going to just stitch across with the seam allowance given in the pattern across the top here. In the pattern, she also suggests that you can draw your line if you want to make sure that you've got exactly the right seam allowance. I trust my presser foot. I use my presser foot to figure out the seam allowance, and I trust my presser foot. So I'm just putting some clips along the top, make sure I've got them both going the right way. And then I'm going to turn around and we're going to stitch these together. And as I said, I'm just going to do across the top. Now we're going to stitch across the top. I'm using my joining stitch length, which for me is a 3.5. So I'm going to just do both of them. I'm back stitching at the beginning and the end of the seam, and then I will be flipping them wrong sides together, and I will probably take it to my iron and press it. So here we go. All right, as I mentioned, I'm going to fold these now wrong sides together, and I'm going to try and get this seam as even on one side as the other, like even on both sides. So not one side's not sticking up more than the other. I'll try and get them all even. I'm going to take it to my iron and press it. So I'll probably start by pressing it this way and then pressing it that way. I'll clip it and then we'll come back and we'll top stitch. I'll do that for both. All right, I've ironed it. I have it a little more, the front sticking up a little more than the back, and that's okay. So when we're looking at it from this side, we won't see the lining poking out. I'm going to switch it to a 5 stitch length, which for me is my top stitch length. And I'm just going to top stitch this about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge all along the top, and I'll do the same for the other one. Now we are going to attach our exterior slip pocket to our main panel piece. So I've taken one of my panels. I had already marked the center, so when I did my quilting. Now I've got my pocket panel here. I found this center and I put it down. Then I measured from either side to make sure that I had the same distance away from the sides on either side. So knowing what those measurements were, and then also having the center measurements, I'm going to do the same thing for this. I've gone ahead, I've marked my center on both the pocket and the exterior panel, and I've also put little lines here for how far away it is on this pocket, and I'm going to center it based on these marks and the center mark of the panel. So I'm going to take my pocket piece and I'm going to put it down just like that. If you don't want to mark yours in from the sides, you can just take a ruler now and check. I did that because I didn't want the ruler on camera any more than it's needed. So I'm clipping this into place. I'm also going to take my snips and I'm going to snip off some of the little pieces, little threads that are coming off the edge of my pocket, because I don't really want those sticking out too much. All right, it doesn't say in the instructions, but I'm going to do it anyways. I'm just going to run a basting stitch down either side of the pocket panel just so that it doesn't shift while I put my webbing on. So I'm just going to go off camera and do those. I'm just running like 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm just running at 5 stitch length. I'm going to do that for both pieces and then we'll move on. All right, now that we have our pockets on, we need to add our webbing. So in this one, I've already added it on. I measured it wrong in the first time, so I've got it all on. We need to make sure we leave, there's measurements in the pattern for all of this, so we need to leave an overhang at the bottom. So I measured up, I took my Choco pen and a ruler, and I measured up from the bottom, just like this one. I've got a line marked. So we're gonna match that line up to the bottom of the pocket, and then I've clipped it into place. I've used my long hair clips to keep, because they're pretty flat, and then I ran it up so that it's halfway. So in this, with this webbing, I don't know if you're going to be able to see, you can kind of see there's almost a center line. It's a seatbelt style webbing with a almost herringbone look. So there is a center line because of the way it was created. So I'm keeping that center line, matching up the bottom, along the bottom, just like this. I'm matched that line up along the bottom, just like that. And then I want to run the edge of the pocket up that center line so that half of the webbing is covering the pocket and half of it's not. I take my long clips and I put them in the bottom here. I'll do the same for the other side. And then I take some more, make sure it's coming up centered. I'll grab some more clips, and I'm just putting one in on the pocket on an angle. Then I will take my ruler and measure up from the top of the pocket, as it says in the pattern. And in this case, you can see I've drawn the line. So we're going to end up sewing up to that line and coming back down. So I've also put clips in here to try and keep the little grab handle as straight as possible. So I'm going to go ahead with this one and finish it off just like this, and then we will sew it into place. Before I move on to sewing it, I just want to say a couple things. The first thing is make sure that whatever you're using to mark on your webbing is erasable. I'm using my Choco pen, so it's just chalk with a little roller on the tip. The other thing is you want to make sure when you're putting your webbing on that you're not getting it, you know, twisted when you're putting it on. You want to make sure that it is not twisted. So flatten it out, bring this edge around, and then match this one at the bottom. You want to make sure that it is not twisted. And then put your clips in. Again, halfway through the webbing. The pocket edge should be halfway through the webbing. All right. So I'm going to finish doing this one and then we'll move on. Okay, so let's sew on this handle. I'm going to switch mine. It doesn't really say whether you use a joining stitch or a top stitch. I'm hoping that my thread doesn't stand out too much. I'm switching it to about a 4 stitch length. Turn this around and I'm going to start along the edge, and you go about 1/8 of an inch in along the edge. So you're just going to stitch up and then come across here. I am going to back stitch across here and then come down the other side. You could do a little box up here if you wanted to. I'm not. I'm just going to back stitch across there. So yeah, up one side, back stitching at the beginning and the end of the seams, up one side and down the other, and hopefully I have enough thread in my bobbin. Okay, I'm going to turn, pivot, and come across, and I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to pivot again, and I'm going to come down the other side. And there we go. I've got one side on. I'm going to go and do the same for the other 3, like the other 3 attachment points. So finish this handle and then go and do the other one, and then we'll move on. Okay, we have the pockets all sewn on. Now they aren't stitched across the bottom, but we are going to be adding the exterior bottom pieces. So I'm just going to set these aside for half a second. So I've got both of them on. I suppose if you wanted, you could put rivets in. I'm not going to. I don't really like putting rivets in webbing. I have done it before, and I actually have a tool that I'm going to be using to try and do rivets and webbing again. I have a soldering iron, I believe it's called, so that I can actually melt the webbing when I put the hole in it, because you don't want to ruin the integrity of the webbing itself by punching a hole in it without sealing the threads around the hole that you put in. But anyways, that's not right now. Right now I'm just going to leave them as is. If you've used a fabric and you want to put rivets in, or a vinyl or whatever, go ahead and do that. I'm setting these aside. So I've got my bottom, they call the exterior lower pieces. According to the instructions, I've gone ahead and I have marked these corners. We are going to be cutting those out. So I've got my scissors. I'm just going to go in and cut these all out. I don't know how everybody does them, but I go in from one side and then go in from the other, because I find that gives me a better point. If I try and go in and then cut back out, I find I get a weird corner in there. So do it however you want. I'm just telling you why I do it this way. So I am using this vinyl, as I mentioned in the when I went through the pieces. I have not interfaced it, and I have not put fusible fleece on it. That's what I have chosen to do. So if you are using a fabric that requires woven interfacing and fusible fleece, make sure you've got it on prior to cutting out your corners. Once you have that, cut out your corners, and then we can now take these and apply them to the bag. So I have my mark here, center mark already. So I'm going to find the center of my lower panel, and this time I'm just going to snip it. Actually, I can snip both sides, and that'll help us when we go to put the bottoms together. I'm going to put them right sides together, matching up the notch. And when I quilted my panel, it kind of shrunk it down, so it's not going to match the base anymore. The base is actually a little too wide. So I'm thinking I'm going to trim down the sides, and then I will cut this notch out, because yeah, I don't think I have enough of a seam allowance. So I'm going to flip this over, find my center, put a clip in the center to hold it, and then I'm going to mark. I don't know if this will mark. Yeah, it's marking a bit. So I'm going to cut down about not quite 1/4 of an inch off of either side. This is closer to 1/8 of an inch. So I'll cut off 1/8 of an inch on either side of these, and then I will remark my corner. And I'll do that off camera. Okay, I've done the one side. So before you cut out your corners, check to make sure that they fit. So in this one, it wasn't quite fitting, so I've cut it down a bit. It's much better now. So I'm placing them right sides together along the bottom edge, so make sure you've got your webbing sticking out, and I'm going to put some clips in it. I'm clipping along the sides to just make sure that it stays even. I'll do the other one off camera, but for now we'll do this. Also, if you decided you were putting in fleece, if you were going to quilt it, you need to quilt it before now. So I'm not quilting it, so it will just be plain. But if you've decided you wanted to quilt it, make sure you quilt it before putting it together like this. Right, now we are going to take it over to the machine. I'm going to do that one off camera, as I said, and we're going to stitch this on with the full seam allowance given in the pattern. So I'm going to set it on a 3.5 stitch length, and then I am going to grab my threads, and I will backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. So again, this is the full seam allowance listed in the pattern, and it's up at the top. It's listed at the beginning of the pattern at the top. Here we go. All right, now we're going to take it out. I'm going to keep it with the piece I just added on the top. So the base piece is on the top, or the lower piece is on the top, and I am going to fold it down so the seam allowance is under the lower panel. We are going to top stitch this in place. So I'm switching to a 5 stitch length for me. You can do whatever works for you. And now I'm going to back stitch beginning and the end of the seam, and I'm going to top stitch this in place. And there we go. Couple things. When you're done this, go ahead and do the other one, and then decide if you're putting a label on like I am. You need to decide where you're putting it. If you were putting it on the pocket, it's a little late now. I'm thinking I'm going to put it right down in here on whatever I choose to be the front panel. I think this may be my front panel because I've got the Eiffel Tower nicely placed there. So go and add your label if you're going to add it. If you needed to add it on the pocket, you should have done it by now. Sorry, I should have mentioned that before. And then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, got the outsides all done. I'm going to set these aside for a minute while I work on the flap. So I already have my interfacing and my fusible fleece added to the, I added it to the lining portion. I believe the instructions have you add it to the exterior, but since I'm using the Mora faux leather, I didn't really want to fuse it, the fleece, to this. So I've added it to my lining piece. I've also gone through and I've marked the centers, the center line here, so in the center, and then up from the bottom, what it says in the instructions. And that's, I don't know if you can see it, right there is where I'm going to be putting my snap. So I've got a little, this is a cutting mat, I've just flipped it over. And I'm going to take the washer, I'm going to put it so that it's centered over the intersection here. I'm going to center that circle over that, and I'm going to mark a line on either side. I'm going to take my 2 pieces of woven interfacing and I'm going to put the marks on here. So I have, you can use a regular blade, but I have these little, they're like little pen blades. I'm going to see how they, I just got them, I haven't tried them yet, so I'm going to see how well they work. So I'm just going to use the pen blade and I'm going to cut. So far not good, but we'll see. Oh, there we go. I got through on that one. So I'll just cut these out and cut these ones out for now. You may have to go over it a few times depending on your blade. These are brand new, so they should be okay. I'm going to use the male portion. It doesn't actually say in the instructions which one to use, so I'm just going to use the male portion on the flap, and I'll use the female portion on the exterior of the bag. So I'm just going to take the male portion, I'm going to stick it in the holes that I just put in. I'm going to take my piece of fusible woven and put it down, and then I'm going to take my washer and I am going to, in the picture she has the snaps, the prongs pointing out, so I'll just follow what it has in the instructions. You can fold them in, you can fold them out. Some people think folding them in makes it bulkier. It actually, like, I mean, you've got both prongs then on top of each other, so it can make it a little bulkier, but there we go. Okay, now that I've got these pressed out, I'm going to take the other piece of fusible woven and I'm going to put it over like that. I'm going to go quickly to my iron. I'm going to press that to seal it, and then we'll move on. And there we go. I have it fused on. If you are using the female snap, it's the one that's magnetic. The male portion isn't. If you're using the female portion on here, be very careful because ironing, I've been told, ironing or heat can demagnetize, but everything's fine. The male portion isn't the magnetized portion, it's the female. So I got that on there, just set this aside. Going to grab the other part of the flap and I'm going to try and center, actually maybe I'll just mark the center on one side, on these sides, snips. I'm going to mark the centers. I've got the centers marked on this, so it should work out. And I'm going to place them right sides together, trying to match up the centers. I'm going to grab a couple clips. I'm going to clip it all the way around, but we are only going to be stitching around this part. We are not stitching it closed. So I'm going to start clipping. I want this edge along the bottom because mine flap seems to be a little bit larger on the fabric side than it is on the vinyl. So I am just making sure, or it's a little bit taller anyways, making sure that I've got this end matched up. And then I'm clipping around. I'll clip across the top too, but we're not stitching across there. All right, going around to the machine and we're going to stitch this together. Stitching this together with the seam allowance, given in the pattern, in this step of the pattern, so not the overall seam allowance, the one listed in this step. I've got it already set on my joining stitch length, which is a 3.5 millimeter. And I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam, and I'm going to just do the outside curved edge. I'm going to first take my scissors and I'm going to just trim off this extra around the edge. And then I'm going to go find my pinking shears and I'm going to trim this whole outside edge with my pinking shears. If you don't have pinking shears, you can notch it with your scissors. So you can go in and you can cut in notches like this. But I want to use my pinking shears. So I'm going to go find those. I'll do that and then we'll come back. All right, I've got it trimmed all the way around. So now I'm going to turn the flap right side out. So I'm just sticking my hand in. I'm going to push the other end into my hand and flip it. I'm also going to run my fingers around the edge to try and press out the side seams or the seams as much as possible. Get the nice rounded corner there. I'm also going to try and do it finger press, but I might end up taking it to the iron and try and get the edges as even as possible on the outside. So now I'm going to put some clips in it. So roll it between your fingers if you need to get it even on the outside. All right, so now I'm going to take this over. There is a spot where we're supposed to trim down the top, but I'm gonna mark it down because I'm not marking it on camera. I'll mark it down how far I'm supposed to cut off, but I may just start top stitching from there and then cut it once it's all fairly solid. So I'm gonna mark it off camera because you're supposed to take off the top edge here, the amount that it says in the pattern. So we'll do that and then I'm gonna top stitch. Now it is very close down here. And there was an option, it says in the top stitching part, it says that you could move your snap up a bit if you wanted. So ideally you would have read through the pattern first and saw that and moved your snap if you felt you need to. I think I should be able to get by. If you have a narrow foot, you may want to use a narrow foot or a zipper foot. I should be fine. So I'm just going to mark across the top to take off the excess. And then I will top stitch, but I'll mark this off first and then we'll go and top stitch. Okay, so I've marked a line across the top. That's what I'm going to cut off after, but because the Mora is so squishy and it can twist, I've decided I'm going to top stitch first and maybe even close that off before I remove that. So I'm going to start just down from that line I drew, and I'm trying to get as close to the edge as possible, so like more like 1/8 of an inch seam allowance for the top stitch. I have it on a 5 stitch length and I will back stitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. And I'm going to take my time going around the flap at the bottom where the snap is. All right, now I'm going to cut across on that line that I drew. I'm also going to find my center again. There we go. Now we're going to add the flap to one of the exterior panels. The bag closes with the flap coming from the back to the front. So if you have, like me, a specific front panel and a back panel, we are putting the front panel aside and we are going to be working on the back with the back panel. So we're going to take our flap and we're going to place it with the wrong side up, or the inside, the magnet side up. And we're going to match it with the center, because I've got center notch in my flap and my bag. And I'm going to grab some clips. I've matched it the center notches, and I'm going to clip this in place. Now I'm going to take it to the machine and we are going to stitch it on with the seam allowance listed in that step. The instructions say to sew the flap in place with the certain seam allowance, so I've set mine to a 3.5 stitch length. If it was said basted in place, then I would use my 5 stitch length, but it says sew, and I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and the end of this seam. Now we're going to install the female portion of the snap on the front of the bag. So I have marked up from the pocket, so I've found the center mark on the pocket, and I've marked up from the edge of the pocket the amount listed in the pattern. I have my crosshairs right here. So I'm going to put the middle of the washer across the middle of the crosshair, and I'm going to mark on either side with the washer. The pattern does not have you placing woven interfacing like it did for the flat panel, so I want to still reinforce it, so I'm going to be using some Decaville Heavy, and I'm also going to be covering it with my duct tape. So I've gone ahead and I've marked the markings from the washer on there. I'm going to take my pen again, and hopefully it works. I'm going to cut the lines on the Decaville Heavy, and I'm going to shift my cutting mat under the front part of the bag, and I'm going to cut out the slots for the female portion of the washer on the bag, the front of the bag. Hopefully that's through. Now I'm going to take my female portion of my snap, and no, it didn't go all the way through. You can also use your stitch ripper to go through. I should just go get my proper cutting knife. I have a craft tool that I usually use. I thought I would give these these little knives a try, but it's not working very well. So they were worth a try. I just got them from Temu, so they weren't overly expensive, but I'm a little disappointed that they're not working. So on the flap, I probably should have put some fray check because it was a woven fabric. I didn't even think of it till now. The canvas fray is a lot easier than the quilting cotton, but it does still fray. So I put some fray check on there. Hopefully that works. I'm going to put the female portion of the snap in these holes. Flip it over. I'm going to put my Decaville Heavy down, my washer, and I'm in this case going to press them out to the sides as well. There we go. Grab a piece of my duct tape. And then put it across that, just to try and keep the prongs from affecting the inside fabric in this case. And on the flap, it was to keep it from rubbing through the vinyl. So there we go. The snap has now been installed. Now we are going to be sewing the two panels together. I'm going to do it slightly differently than the pattern. The pattern has you sewing up the sides and the bottom at the same time. I like having the seam and the bottom stitched open. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clip the bottom. So I've matched up, put them right sides together, matched up the center notch on the bottom, and I'm clipping it across. I'm going to go around now to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch this with the full seam allowance listed in the pattern. So I've got it set on a 3.5 stitch length, and hopefully I have enough thread for this. I'm going to stitch it at the full seam allowance given in the pattern. I now backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. I'm just going to check my bobbin to make sure I've got enough thread. Good thing I checked because I didn't have enough. Now I'm going to butterfly the seam and I'm going to do a top stitch on either side. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to spread apart the seam and I'm going to stitch down top stitch down either side of this bottom seam. I just like how flat the base lies when I've done this. So I've got it, I think I already said I've got it on my 5 stitch length, and I'm going to back stitch here, go down the other end, come back and back stitch at the end. And I'm trying to do about 1/8 of an inch away from the center seam. So it's very floppy right now. Anyways, I'm trying to run my finger along the center and then hold it down with this hand, making sure that I have it separated the whole way. Make sure that it's flat, and I'm gonna come across and turn and go back down the other side, wiping off any machine oil I get on it. And there we go, nice flat. I'm going to fold it back together like this, so right sides facing, and I'm going to match up these seams on the sides and the edges, and I'm going to go around and clip it all. I'll do that off camera because there's not enough room, and when we come back I will stitch the sides. With the seam allowance given in the pattern, I am going to stitch up either side. This side I'm starting from the bottom. I may do it from the bottom again on the other side so that these seams end up matching up properly. So here we go. And I 3.5 stitch length if I haven't said it. All right, one side done, go ahead and do the other one. I'll do it off camera. All right, both sides are done. Now we are going to box the bottoms of the bag. So I'm going to stick my finger in the side, spread open the side seam, and then match up the side seam with the seam on the base and pull it apart like this. I'm going to put in some clips and do the same thing for the other side. All right, now I'm going to stitch across the bottom with the full seam allowance. This is boxing the bottom if you haven't done it before. So I'm still on a 3.5 stitch length, and I want to make sure that my side seam stays open. The bottom should, because I've top stitched it, but if you haven't top stitched it like me, make sure both of them stay open while you do this. You could just nest the seams, but I find on the outside of bags I prefer to have the seams butterflied like this. It doesn't say in the instructions exactly which one to do, so pick one, and I would do them exactly the same. I would make sure that you do them exactly the same on both sides of the bag. So here we go. And I'm going to back stitch over the center just to make sure that it holds. Do the same for the other side. And before I go ahead, this one didn't do it properly, so I'm going to snip the threads, lie it down flat, and go over it again. Okay, I'm going to go off camera and do the other side, and then we'll move on. Okay, I've got the bottoms done. It doesn't say to trim the seam allowance at this point, so I'm not going to. It may say it later, I'll check. So I'm going to put my hand in, and I'm going to turn the bag right side out. So grab the bottom, push it through, pop out the corners on both sides, and there we go. This is the exterior of the bag, and I'm just going to test the flap, the snap placement on the flap, and looks okay to me. So there we go. So this is what the exterior is going to look like of the bag. If you want it to be a little more sturdy, then you might want to put either woven interfacing or fleece or whatever, even on the Moro faux leather. I didn't, because I thought it would be sturdy enough. And when we get the center in, or the lining in, it might be. But we'll see how it goes. It's going to be a floppy bag for me. If you want it a little more rigid, then you may need to put more stabilizer. So the woven interfacing will keep this from twisting, and the fleece or a Decaville light or even a Decaville heavy, I'm not sure. Decaville heavy in the bottom possibly, Decaville light on the rest of it. I wouldn't put Decaville heavy up here in all of this bottom panel, but you might want a piece across the bottom. Depends on how rigid you want your bag. But this is what I've got, and I'm going to continue on with the way it is. So now we've checked, everything looks right to me, and now we'll move on to the next step. All right, last step before we move on to the lining of the bag is we're going to work with our D-ring strap tabs. So I have taken my strap tabs, that's the way we cut them out. I've folded them in half from, top to bottom, and mine has a directional print. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to see this or not on the strap tab after I'm done, but I have the Eiffel Tower going this way, so I folded it in half top to bottom like that, and then I folded each side into the center and then folded it in again. So that should fit. Yep, it fits my strap tab. So I've done that for both of them. I am going to take these to the machine. I'm going to do this off camera because you don't need to see me stitch around the tabs, but I'm going to stitch across, down, like all the way around both of them. I suppose you could put more, you could do it a couple times if you want. I'm just going to do it the once, and I'm going to do it about the regular 1/8 of an inch top stitch away from the edge. So yeah, I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to do that, and then we can move on to the next part of the step. All right, now that I've got them stitched, I'm going to feed them into the D-ring like that. So I'm going to just slide it on, fold this over matching the end, and I am going to clip it. Now I'm going to just go back to the machine and stitch along here as close to the D-ring as I possibly can on both of them, and then I'll be back. Now I'm going to take my D-rings and I am going to center them over the side seam. So I'm going to actually try and split the seam, like butterfly the seam on the side. I'm going to take one of my D-rings and I'm going to place it on. Now there is an amount that she suggests to overhang. I'm just going to guess for now, and I'll measure before I stitch them on, and I'll put it on the other side as well. And again, I'm going to butterfly the seam. Hopefully that will lie nice then. So I'm going to put it on about there. I'm going to move around to the machine and I'm going to stitch these on. Okay, the pattern does not mention, it just leaves these straps clipped on. I prefer to baste them in place so that I know if I set this aside, which I'm probably going to do, set this aside overnight, that they're not going to move, that they'll be just in the right place when I go to start tomorrow. So I'm just going to, I've got it on a 5-stitch length. I'm just doing like an 1/8 of an inch across the top here and back stitch to hold these in place. And because we're also going to be going on to work on the lining. So do the other one, and then I'm going to set this aside and we can move on to the lining. Now we are moving on to the lining. So you're going to need your 2 lining pieces, and if you haven't already interfaced them, then interface them as needed. And we are going to need our 4 pocket lining panels. For one of the main panels, you want to measure down from the top according to the measurements in the instructions, and we want to cut it apart. So we have like that. I'm going to set one aside. The other thing we want to do is take one of our pocket lining pieces, and then we want to mark it again down from the top according to the instructions, as well as from the inside or from either side. So I have all my pieces marked that way. I'm just going to grab my scissors and I'm going to find the center of this piece, and I'm going to find the center of the lining panel. Put it back up. Now I'm going to place these right sides together at the center notches, matching up the center notches, so something like that. And I'm going to put a couple clips in it. Now we're going to take this over to the machine and we are going to stitch down one side, across, and then back up with a very small stitch length. All right, as I said, we're going to stitch down, across, and back with, I'm going to do a 2.5 stitch length, and I'm going to try and make sure that I pivot, have my needle down right in that point and that pivot there, and I'll back stitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. Right, now we are going to snip in these sides down. So I'm going to cut it down to about 1/4 of an inch, seam all the way around. And now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to snip into the corner to, but not through my stitches. If I do snip my stitches, then I need to go back and restitch it to reinforce it. There we go. So the next thing I'm going to do is take it over to my iron, and I'm going to press it back and then press it down. And I'm going to pop these, and I'm going to do it for the corners and everything. So I can finger press this, but I really want a nice seam, so I'm going to take it to my iron, and I'll be right back. All right, so I have it all nicely pressed. So I'm going to put the whole panel, so they're wrong sides together now. I'm going to put this whole panel face down. I'm going to take another pocket panel and then put the linings right sides together, and I'm going to match across the top so it kind of looks like that. So I'm going to go across the top and then down the sides, and I'm going to put a couple clips in it. And it doesn't matter as much if the bottom isn't lined up. You kind of want the tops to be lined up, although it will be hidden in the seam. I'll just clip those two together. We're not going to stitch the panel. We are only going to stitch the pocket pieces. So make sure when you're clipping that you clip them separately from the lining panel. There we go. So now I'm going to open this up. I put my clips the wrong way, but whatever. I'm going to open this up and we are going to stitch the two short sides and the long side, so 3 sides basically, with the full seam allowance from the pattern. Flip this over. And I'm doing it at a 3.5 stitch lengths because I want this closed up nicely. I will back stitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. Right, before I continue, I realized I made a mistake. I was supposed to leave a turning hole at the bottom. So I'm just going to grab my stitch ripper. I'm going to mark a gap on the bottom. So I'll just put this here. So on the bottom here, I'm going to leave a gap for turning. So I'm just going to make a mark. Find my pen. So I'm just going to make a mark a bit in from this side and about the same amount in from this side. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I am just going to put it back under my needle, and I'm going to start over here, back stitch, come to the corner, and then off, and then come on, and then finish. I'm just going to reinforce these corners. Then I will take these stitches out and we will continue on from there. So I'll do that off camera, and I'll just show you what I have before we move on. All right, so there we go. I've got the opening here. You can go and you can iron these. I'm going to go do this off camera. You can iron this open. It's a little hard when I've come off the edge here. that to actually open it all, but you can iron it back if you want, like that, open. And then the other thing I'm going to do, grab my scissors, and I'm just going to trim some off of the corners here. And then once I'm done at the iron, we will move on to the next step. Right now it's time to add the top piece of this lining panel. So I want to have it finished with my triangles facing up. So I'm going to take my piece, set it like this, then I'm going to flip it right sides together and clip across the top. Right, there we go. Now I'm still on a 3.5 stitch length. I'm going to sew this together with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Back stitching at the beginning and the end of the seam. And now with the piece we just added, I've got my seam allowance to the left. I'm going to flip the top part up over top of the seam allowance. You can take it to the iron and press if you need to. I should be okay. And now we're going to top stitch this piece up. So I'm changing it to a 5 stitch length. Make sure that your pocket is going down away from your seam. I just realized as I was stitching this, top stitching this, that I missed the step of top stitching around this here. So before you add the back panel on, mine's gonna lie pretty straight or pretty flat. I think I'm okay, but it would have looked nice too if I could have just top stitched the 2 short edges and the long edge. So it is in the pattern. I just completely missed that step. So this is what I have right now. I'm just going to, before I move on, I'm going to find the center, because we're going to need the center of this piece. Then we will move on to creating the zipper pocket. So I'm just going to finish doing this and then we'll move on to the zipper. Before we move on to creating the zipper pocket, you need to take the panel we just finished, place it over top of the other panel, and as you can see here we have extra. So now we need to cut that off. So I'm going to mark, and I'll go off camera and I will take off the extra from the second panel. So you need to do this before we start working with the zipper pocket. So I'm just going to set my other pocket aside and then do this off camera. All right, moving on to the zipper pocket. I have my zipper tape, I have a zipper slider, I have one of my pocket lining panels. There's another one I've just got set off to the side. I've taken my Choco pen and I have marked a line down from the top according to the instructions. I have also marked my zipper box on one of the pocket lining panels. Now I want to center this up, so I've got the center of the panel, but I need the center at this line, or at the line. There. I don't want too big of a mark because I'm hoping it'll come off. And I want to take the pocket panel, I'm going to match it up with the center mark along this line that I drew. Now you can put pins in it if you want. I am going to just try and move it around to the machine as it is. The instructions have you sewing the whole perimeter of the box. It's up to you if you want to sew around the whole perimeter or just the 2 long sides. I find the 2 long sides I don't get as many puckers in the corner if I just do the 2 long sides. So I'm just going to do the 2 long sides, but according to the instructions, she has you going down the short sides as well. So it's up to you, decide what you want to do. So now we're heading over to the machine. All right, we're at the machine. I have put my needle down right in the corner there, and I will backstitch at the beginning and the end of each seam. And as I mentioned, I'm just going down the 1 long edge. I have changed it to a 2.5 stitch length, a shorter stitch length, to try and make this a nice even seam. Now I'm just going to turn lift my needle, shift over. I'm going to keep the thread joined and I'm going to put it down on the other side. So as I mentioned, you can stitch this if you want, or you can do just as I've done and back stitching again. I'm going to trim this jump thread. I'm going to also cut down. So I have drawn the center line. I don't normally draw the center line. It's not absolutely necessary that you get it perfectly in the center, as long as you don't cut the sides too close to the stitch line. It should be fine. You don't want it to come apart, really. So I'm folding it in half just so I can start off. There we go. I am going to cut down to where I've made my point, and so all the way down to where I've made the point, and then I'm going to cut into the corners to, but not through, those stitches. The closer you get to the stitches, the nicer your corners are going to be. Just don't cut your stitches. Got that cut all open. I am going to take it to the iron, and I'm going to press it, and I'm going to turn the whole pocket through so that I end up with wrong sides together. Something like that, only it'll be nice and pressed. And I'll try and get rid of my line while I'm doing it. All right, I have my pocket opening, the zipper box all in with the lining piece. I have put a little bit of fray check just in the corners because it is a woven fabric, and I tried to get rid of my line. It's not completely gone, but it's probably good enough for now. Just going to set this aside, and we're going to work with our zipper. So I have my zipper cut. I use Zipper by the yard. So I have my piece here, and this is a nylon coil zipper. So I need to put on my zipper slider. So I'm just going to go over how I do it manually, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. Hopefully it shows up. So zipper coils close by alternating the teeth. So in this case, I've got my right, left, and so on. So I know if I keep it right, left, like it is right now, with just one tooth on each side, I will have a nice straight zipper, because this is how I cut it off, and it's nice and flat. So I see that the right side needs to go first, so I break it apart. I like to slip my zipper slider on the side that I'm starting with, but you don't have to. And then I slip the other side in to the slider. Pull it back a tiny little bit to try and make sure that the teeth look straight. Use my index finger and push the slider on. Pull it down a little bit and check. And hopefully that's clear, that you can see that I've got the right, left. Again, there. Just going to take, there's a little bit of clear thread there. I'm going to take it and clean it, melt it. And there we go. I've got the slider on. I'm just going to stick it somewhere around the center. Prior to that, I also put on the double stick tape so that it makes it handy for putting the zipper in. It keeps it in place while we move it to stitch it on. So I'm going to just keep my zipper pocket, my whole panel with the pocket I've already attached here. I'm going to take off, I want my zipper to close to the left, so I have the little nose part of the zipper slider pointing to the left. So that's closing this way, it will open to the right. So when I put this down, try and get my slider charm out of the way, and then I'm peeling the paper backing off of the tape just on the bottom. I'm going to fold this back, and I'm going to try and make sure it's centered. So I want it centered in the box, side to side, and top and bottom. So I'm just going to stick it in there right now, and I'll go just off camera and I'll make sure that it's even. All right, that's not too bad. There are tools you can use to help you center it. I don't have them. They're like templates that you end up putting over top of the zipper, and it gives you the even amount on either side. I just go by feel. So now I'm going to pull this piece back. I'm going to take the paper backing off of the second piece of tape, and I'm going to put the top down as evenly as I can on the other side. All right, the other thing we want to make sure before we go too far is that we have it centered enough. So I'm fine because I've got stuff sticking over. If you don't have quite the right amount, you want to make sure that your edge here isn't too close to this opening, or it can end up pulling the zipper slider right off. So anyways, I'm going to double check this, but we're going to move around to the machine and stitch this in place. Okay, now we want to stitch around this opening. I have mine on about a 3.5 stitch length. You can do 3.5, 4, whatever you would like. It is sewing it in place, but it is also decorative. So I don't know if you want too small of a stitch. So anyways, what I'm going to do, and this is not in the instructions, it's just something I picked up from another YouTuber, sewing bag making YouTuber, is I've got my zipper slider in the center, and then I want to start a little bit down from there. I'm going to come all the way down to the end, across and back to where approximately across from where I started. Then I'll move the slider out of the way and continue around. And this way I'm not sewing this bubble in. So it's a little more even this way. I believe it was Tori from Seems Legit. I believe that's where I got this from. I didn't come up with it on my own. And I am going to backstitch at the beginning and the end. You can leave your tails long and pull them through if you want. I'm just going to backstitch. Now coming over this, it's up to you if you want to do just one line of stitch or two. This is a place where every time you close it and every time you open your zipper, those ends take some pressure because the zipper closes. People usually close it really hard to either side, or whip it open or slam it closed, whatever. They do it really hard, and these stitches can pop, and you will have more stitches when we stitch the pocket together, but it can be good to have some reinforcing stitches over. I don't always do this, and I haven't had one of these pockets come apart, but I have had other pockets come apart, so I'm just going to reinforce both ends. Now that I've done that end, I'm going to move my slider down, and I'm going to continue around to where I started. There we go. Now we're going to move over and add the back piece. Now we're going to take our last pocket lining panel, and we are going to put it right sides together. So if you have a directional fabric like I do, make sure that it's going in the right direction, and place it just over top of the pocket we just attached. I'm going to grab some clips, and I'm going to clip it along all four sides. We're going to sew along all four sides. Okay, now we're going to take it over to the machine, and we are going to stitch this in place. And there we go. Before I move on, I'm just going to measure out the corners and cut those out of both lining pieces. Okay, I have my corners cut out on both my pieces. The instructions have you, when we're sewing, we are going to start at one seam allowance and finish at another one. In the instructions, she has it drawn out to make it easier, so I've decided to draw out. So by doing this, starting at one seam allowance here, we ensure that the top part fits. By gradually increasing it down, we make the lining that much smaller so that the lining doesn't bag inside. It will fit nice and snug when we take a slightly larger seam allowance at the bottom. So now we're going to take these pieces and we are going to put them together. We're going to match. They should be pretty close, so we're going to match most of it up, and we're going to stitch across the bottom first. This part, stitching across the bottom, is in the instructions, but the way I'm going to do it is like the outside. I'm going to stitch it, I'm going to butterfly it, and then I'm going to top stitch either side, and then I will clip down here clip all the way along the sides and stitch the sides together. So I'm going to start with the bottom here. So I'm going to put some clips in it, and then I'm taking it to the machine and I will stitch across. I'm going to stitch across the bottom here with the seam allowance given in the pattern. In the pattern, it has you doing the sides first, then the bottom. As I said, I'm going to do the bottom first, then I'll do the sides, and I'm back stitching at the beginning and the end of the seam. And I have it on a 3.5 stitch length. All right, butterflying the seam and then top stitching with a 5 stitch length. All right, now we're going to match up the sides and sew down the sides with the seam allowance that I've drawn. And I'm sewing this at the 3.5 stitch length. And do the same for the other side. All right, now we are going to box the corners, and just like before, we're going to, I put my fingers in and I pull it to the side. I'm butterflying my seams. Whether you push one way and one the other way, it's up to you. Now we have cut an even amount on either side. So had we kept the same seam allowance down at the bottom, these would have matched up, but they're not matching because I took a larger seam allowance at the bottom. So just pinch it, match up the center. I'm matching up the side seam with the center mark, and I'm going to put a clip in it. I'm not sure. I did what it says in the instructions. I'm not sure I would take that large of a seam allowance at the bottom again. A little bit larger, and I would match this to this so that the corners, so that this cutout matches. So let's say, for instance, I took, I don't know, 1/2 inch down here. I would make sure I take a 1/2 inch across the bottom too. Then it's even. The reason it's not even is because we took a larger one on the side than we did on the bottom. So we're just going to try our best to get this pinched out. I'm going to put it under my needle, and I'm going to stitch across with the smaller of the 2 seam allowances. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to trim this down. So you can see it was matched up in the center, but it's not matched up on the other side. And I tried to make sure that I had a good amount of seam allowance there. I'm just going to trim back the excess. I'll do the same thing for the other side, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now it's time to assemble the bag. So we're going to leave our lining wrong side out and our outside of our bag right side out. I'm going to undo my snap and pop it back down. I'm going to take the exterior of my bag and I'm going to put it inside. Now, if you want, I'm going to have my slip pocket on the front and my zipper pocket at the back. So I'm going to put the front in where this opening is, and I'm going to tuck it down as far as I can inside the bag. We want the tops to line up, so you're going to have to the bottom isn't going to be perfectly, it's not going to be fitting corners in the corners. And you want to make sure your grab handles are down out of the way. So I'm going to start at the side, making sure your hardware is out of the way, and I'm going to try and line up the side of my pocket or my bag with the side. Want to make sure your flap is inside and the handles. And I'm going to grab some clips and I'm going to put a couple clips in it. So we're going to start on the sides. Okay, and then I'm going to come around to the other side and do the same thing. Make sure everything is tucked down out of the way. And I'm butterflying my seams on the side. Can't really see whether I've got it perfectly on because I've got the D-ring connectors in the way. So hopefully I've marked my centers, which I have. So I'm just going to put my hands in and pull this somewhat tight and work my way to the center. Make sure the center line or center notches match. And I'm going to actually, I think I'm going to sew it the other way. So I'm going to put a couple clips in. So I will be sewing it like this from the inside. So I'm putting my clips facing the inside because the flat side is on the side that's going to be down on the bed of my machine, sort of on the table of my machine. Because if I leave it the other way, then they get caught. My table catches a lot. So do the same thing with the other side. I'm matching up the center, making sure. Use as many clips as you need to. Make sure it's evenly spread all the way around. So if one side has a little bit more, then pull it a little taut and try and flatten it out as best as possible. All right, there we go. I'm going to turn around to the machine and we are going to stitch this. Okay, as I mentioned, we're going to be stitching from the inside. So I have the inside of my bag flat down on my machine. And we're going to stitch this around with the full seam allowance for the pattern. I picked a spot on the back, making sure I can feel where my handles are. The flap is here, so I just picking a spot on the back, the flat part of the back or the straight part of the back. And I'm going to back stitch at 3.5 stitch length, and I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and the end of the seams. And I will go all the way around, making sure that everything is pushed down out of the way. So trying to get up on here, my machine is struggling. I have this fabric that I use as a hump jumper to try and lift up my presser foot and get up onto the fabric. So it just helps. I'm going to reinforce the D-ring anchor points and continue on. All right, if you want, you can sew a second line of stitching all the way around if you don't think this yours is going to hold. I don't feel the need to, so I'm just going to move over to the table and we're going to pull everything right side out. All right, so there we've got the opening here. So I'm just going to stick my hand in the opening and start pulling the bag right side out. I've grabbed the exterior of the bag first, and now I'm going to push the lining right side out. Now I'm going to grab the bag at the top and I'm going to fold it so that the seam allowance and the lining are going down inside the bag. I'm going to tuck the pocket in for a bit while I get everything rolled. So I want it so that I've got a nice crisp edge around the top here. So I'm going to roll it in my fingers and try and make sure it's nice and rolled. I don't want too much of the lining sticking out. I would like it, if it can be in a bit, that would be great. If it can't be in, I'd like it even with the top. And for now, I'm just going to put a clip in it. Because I can iron all these fabrics, I may just take it to the iron to make sure I've got a nice crisp edge. And iron that. So I'm just going to keep clipping around. I'm going to do it all the way around, and then if I need to iron it, I'll iron it, and then we'll move on to the top stitch. Okay, back from the iron, and I have ironed all the way around. Make sure if you're using faux leather or vinyl that you don't scorch it or melt it. So I used a pressing cloth over that. So I'm going to start. I've decided I'm going to do it without my table. You can flip this inside out if you don't have a free arm. You can flip it inside out and stitch from the inside, which is actually on the outside. I've just decided I have this, I'm going to use it. So I'm going to put it under my needle, probably in about here. It's on the back, and if I start off and I don't have great stitches, then it's kind of hidden at the back and I will be back stitching, so it will overlap. So you want to make sure that you've got your strap, your grab handles down out of the way, and your flap up. So I'm just going to go all the way around, back stitching at the beginning and the end of the seam. And I have it on a 5 stitch length, and I'm doing the top stitch, our usual top stitch, which is about 1/8 of an inch. So here we go. Coming up to our D-rings, if you need your hump jumper or whatever, have it ready and make sure your hardware is out of the way. Before we move on to the shoulder strap, we need to close our slip pocket. So I'm just going to reach inside the bag and I'm going to pull out the slip pocket. I'm just going to pop out the corners so it makes it easier for me to line up the bottom. Now I have ironed it, so it should be not too bad, but and I also have the original holes that I used. So I'm just going to fold it so that I have these nice long edges that are matched up, and I'm going to put a couple clips in it. I'm going to go over to the machine and I'm going to stitch from just before where I ended my stitches to just after where I ended my stitches, and I will back stitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. You don't need to watch me do this, it's just a simple straight line. All right, there we go. I've got it all stitched. I'm going to just put the pocket back in to the opening and push out the corners. Make sure that the lining panel is lying flat in there. There we go. Pockets in, lining is all down, and I'm going to clip. Okay, gonna set this aside and we are gonna work on the shoulder strap. All right, I don't see anywhere in the instructions where it actually explains how to make the shoulder strap. It's not very difficult. We are only adding 2 swivel hooks. The measurements are in the instructions, but are in the cutting chart, but their instructions aren't there. So I've got my shoulder strap here and I've got my 2 swivel hooks. I'm going to take one of my swivel hooks, slide the webbing through the flat edge of the swivel hook. I'm going to fold it over approximately 1 inch and then fold it down again like that. So this way we are hiding the raw edge so it doesn't, I've melted it, but it can still fray. So that's one side. Put this down. So I'm going to call the side with the fold the wrong side. So I want to make sure that I end up with the wrong side, like with the folds on the same side. So I've got this is the wrong side, wrong side, wrong side. I want to put my swivel hook on so that the flat edge is towards the wrong side. Then I'm going to fold it over and fold it over again. Let's put a couple clips in it. And there we have. So we've got, this is the wrong side all the way around here. So we've got the fold hiding the ends on the wrong side of our webbing. So it's not, we don't want it the opposite. You want to have your wrong sides to there. You want to have your folds so that you can put it on towards the inside. Swivel hooks can twist, but it's nice if you have it so that you have a right side and a wrong side of your strap. Anyways, I'm going to be stitching these on, and I'm probably going to stitch them on 2 lines. I'm going to put one as close to the bottom part of the swivel hook as possible, and the other one just up from this edge. I have to switch out my thread, so I'm just going to do this off camera and do both of them, and when I'm done, then we can clip it on, and we are done. And there we go. The shoulder strap is all done. I have stitched either side, and now we can clip it on the bag. So I'm going to clip it so that the webbing, the fold part is on the inside, but it's a swivel hook so it can spin around. So there we go. go. This is the Fab Flap Bag by Belle Originals. It's such a cute little bag. It's a great size, and it's nice that it's all rectangle, so it makes it a fairly quick sew. The one thing I think I'll do in the future, although it's standing right now on its own, the Mora faux leather isn't overly stiff, so it wants to collapse. But that was me, that was my choice of fabrics and my choice of stabilizer, and I can't say I chose poorly, but I could have stabilized this more. But if we got something inside, let's see. Oh, it definitely will stand if we've got something inside of it, no problem. And we got the little grab handles and the little flap. Such an awesome little bag. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for other content. And yeah, hope to see you in the next video.